Spire Motorsports is rumored to have a potential fourth part-time entry in 2025, and Alex Bowman was disqualified from the NASCAR Cup race at the Charlotte ROVAL and has been eliminated from the playoffs. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them straight really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Hy-Vee, as there was a report by Bruce Martin that Hy-Vee will not return to Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing in 2025. Throughout the year, if you've been paying attention to IndyCar, there's been a lot of chatter that Hy-Vee was potentially going to be leaving Rahal. There are rumors that Foyt could pick up the sponsorship. There were also rumors that Aaron McLaren with Christian Lundgaard going over there, with Hy-Vee being a big fan of Christian Lundgaard. There have rumors they could also go to Aaron McLaren in 2025. This is definitely shocking, but I think Hy-Vee wants to get bigger exposure. There's also rumors going around that Hy-Vee could leave IndyCar potentially at the end of 2026 or just focus on IndyCar altogether. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. It's definitely a big shock and a loss of sponsorship. This means that Rahal Letterman Lanigan is going to have to look for someone that might bring sponsorship. There have rumors about Stingray Robb going over there, and he does bring funding to the team. So we'll see what happens. Rahal, obviously the whole breach and the whole FBI raid that happened affected it as well. But crazy to think that Hy-Vee will not be with Rahal Letterman Lanigan going forward in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Petit Le Mans. While you have the NASCAR Xfinity Series race going on with the controversy, you also have Petit Le Mans going on, which is the season finale for IMSA every single year. The race was very compelling and very, very interesting. And at the end, Chip Ganassi Racing would come off the corner and pick up their Petit Le Mans win. A big win, Scott Dixon being part of the organization, Ranger van der Zand being part of the organization. I believe this is Chip Ganassi Racing's first Petit Le Mans win in a very long time. And it's a walk-off win considering the fact that Chip Ganassi Racing, I believe, will not be back in IMSA in 2025, as they will not be part of the Cadillac group next year as they focus fully on IndyCar. This is definitely a big shocker. Not going to be back next year, but it's a big win for the team. Congratulations to Chip Ganassi Racing on winning Petit Le Mans. It's a major win for the organization, and like I said, massive and major congratulations to Petit Le Mans, the Chip Ganassi Racing, on winning the Petit Le Mans in 2024. Really happy for that organization. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we had the Bathurst 1000. Last night, of course, the Bathurst 1000 took place, and it was a very interesting race like it was some of the other events. And no shocker or surprise, Brody Kosecki and Todd Hazelwood, who had won the pole for the race at the Supercars Bathurst 1000, they were able to go on and win the race. This is the first time that Brody Kosecki has ever won the Bathurst 1000, so congratulations to him on getting his first ever Bathurst win. He absolutely earned it. He's been really strong. He's been really good these last 2 years. Of course, he's competing for the championship. There's been a lot of turmoil, obviously, with Erebus, him being back there for the remainder of the year. Unknown if he's going to be back with the team yet for 2025 at this time. But a massive congratulations, a well-earned win for both Brody Kosecki and Todd Hazelwood. It's a massive deal, and nonetheless, really great to see them able to get it done. Congratulations to both drivers on winning their first ever Bathurst, a well-deserved win, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ben Bayshore. Now, Eric Jones was in the media center yesterday speaking to the media, and Eric Jones says that Ben Bayshore will be the crew chief for Eric Jones for the remainder of 2024, with it unsure on who the crew chief will be in 2025. Remember, as announced earlier this week, that Dave Ellens had parted ways with Legacy Motor Club after being with the Legacy organization since 2022, and Dave joined as the crew chief for Eric Jones in the 2021 or 2022 season. They have had a lot of success together in year number one. For the remainder of the year, including the race earlier today at the Charlotte ROVAL, Ben Bayshore will be the crew chief. Now, obviously, Ben Bayshore has been a little bit hit or miss as the crew chief in the NASCAR Cup Series. He did have a lot of success in his Xfinity last year with John Hunter Nemechek, but it's been a major disappointment with him being in the Cup Series this year. I think Ben is an okay crew chief. I think he's a really good Xfinity crew chief, but not that great of a NASCAR Cup Series crew chief. He really did not work well with Kyle Busch in the NASCAR Cup Series. They just never seemed to gel, and there never was that chemistry that you desperately need if you're going to be very, very competitive. I don't know who the crew chief will be. Maybe Brian Camping moves over and becomes the crew chief Eric Jones in 2025. Legacy, though, needs to keep things consistent and stop changing everything, because because that's been a major factor to their struggles. If you keep changing everything, you're not going to improve. So I think Ben will be maybe the crew chief next year, but we'll have to wait and see who officially does in fact become the crew chief for 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greg Biffle. Now, it was reported and confirmed that Greg Biffle received a standing ovation earlier today at Charlotte Motor Speedway right before the Charlotte ROVAL took place. Greg Biffle was able to wave the green flag as the honorary starter, as Greg Biffle has been considered a hero for everything he has been doing in North Carolina in the Asheville area. Greg Biffle has been helping out in massive ways. If you've been on social media, he's been donating certain things, helping with Starlink, helping to bring packages over, helping a lot of people across the North Carolina area and also throughout Tennessee as well. Greg Biffle, in my opinion, should receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom because everything he's been able to do is honestly incredible. And honestly, he should be inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame immediately just because of everything he's been able to do and accomplish off the racetrack. Greg Biffle was an amazing competitor on the racetrack, and he's an amazing individual off the racetrack. To see what he's been able to do is very admirable and really awesome to see. So I'm really happy for him to receive that, and great to see that Greg Biffle got the standing ovation. He's earned it, and it's absolutely justified that he got that. Not congratulations, but really glad to see that he was able to receive the standing ovation. Congratulations to him on receiving that standing ovation. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Eddie DeHaan. As it was announced yesterday or a couple days ago on Friday that Eddie DeHaan will spot for Justin Haley in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025. Eddie DeHaan will move over to Spire Motorsports after being with Stewart Haas Racing this year. Eddie, of course, had been the spotter for Chase Elliott for many seasons, and then in 2024, he went to work over with the Ford team. So what's really interesting about this is basically you're going to have the Ford team, which will be the number 17, because, of course, Rodney Childers is going to be the crew chief for Justin Haley in 2025. Eddie is one of the best spotters in the game. He's been extremely good spotting in the NASCAR Cup Series. He, of course, was a spotter when Chase Elliott won his first NASCAR Cup Series championship 4 years ago, and I think what he's been able to do as a spotter has been incredible. We know Spire Motorsports has, of course, behind the scenes, been hiring a lot of big-name people to really help their program get better, and to be honest, it's been working. Spire has shown a lot of speed this year in 2024, and of course, with the Gamebridge money over there, they're going to be able to get whoever they want. They're building a formidable organization, and going into 2025, they have a lot of success, and potentially even a fourth car for 2025 as well. But I think this is a great decision to bring him on. I think he's a fantastic spotter, and basically, I think he's going to do an amazing and incredible job spotting for Justin Haley next year. We also got an announcement last week that Josh Williams will be spotting for Shane Van Gisbergen and Connor Zilch, which I think that's a great move for that as well, by the way. But I'm really excited about this nonetheless. I think Eddie DeHaan has done an incredible and a fantastic job, and glad to see that he will be spotting for Justin Haley in 2025. Great decision to bring him in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, we have a couple Shane Van Gisbergen stories to go through, but last night after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race concluded, Shane Van Gisbergen put out a really nice post thanking Kaulig Racing for everything in 2024, but unfortunately talked about the fact he was eliminated in the round of 12. SVG just missed out by a few points after not winning yesterday at the Charlotte ROVAL. He pretty much needed to win the race, and unfortunately because he had older tires, he was not able to get it done, which is a tough break considering he had come into the weekend being the favorite, and I think a lot of us expected that he was going to be the dominant car, but it seemed like his cars, since Kevin Walters come in as a crew chief, he hasn't done as good of a job. Now, that being said, I think Shane Van Gisbergen has done a fantastic job in 2024. I don't think many of us expected SVG to make the playoffs. I don't think many of us expected for him to have 3 wins this year and be tied for the most wins in 2024. He has been exceptional throughout the 2024 season, and for him to be as strong and good as he's been this year is an incredible and amazing accomplishment. And I know that he got eliminated, but the fact he was competitive this year, and he's gotten better at ovals, that's a better thing, is he ran really well at Kansas, got a top 10 there after having a terrible car early in the race, and he ran really well at other tracks like Darlington, where he had a chance at a top 5 and at one point had the fastest car. I think that SVG has done an exceptional job. He's gone up to speed really quickly. He's done an impressive job. A lot of people have been inspired and impressed with what he's been able to do. He's been the best rookie this year too, in my opinion. Yes, Jesse Love advanced, but Love has not been as strong as SVG, and certainly Haley Deegan wasn't as good either. I think he's been the best rookie, and personally, I think he should get the Rookie of the Year this year just because of what he was able to accomplish. So I know he didn't get passed around, but he should absolutely be proud of everything he accomplished in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. To be honest, he's done overall an amazing and fantastic job. I know he was not able to get out of the round, but nonetheless, he did an overall amazing and a really strong job. Congratulations on a great first year. Now the goal is to finish off the year well and maybe go out into the next couple Cup Series races and win those races potentially before the end of the season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Riley Herbst and Anthony Alfredo. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race yesterday, you saw the contact in the crash between Riley Herbst and Anthony Alfredo. I believe lap 36 or 37 in the race, they were on the restart coming off of the final corner. Riley Herbst and Anthony Alfredo were battling really hard for position, I believe for about 9th or 10th in the middle of the pack. Riley Herbst had been struggling most of the day. Going into the final corner, Riley Herbst really never gave an inch to Anthony Alfredo going into that final turn. And if you go past that line, you can get penalized. Well, he just sends it in the corner completely, doesn't give Anthony Alfredo a chance and opportunity, that being Riley Herbst, and Anthony shows a little bit of a lesson and pays him back a little bit, and this results in both those guys having their days come to a close, and also unfortunately costs other drivers like Sheldon Creed a shot to make the next round, and other drivers like Parker Retzlaff got collected, Josh Williams, teammate of Shane Van Gisbergen, and AJ Allmendinger, he got collected in that. I believe Nathan Burr might have also got collected in that wreck, I'm not entirely sure, but there were a lot of big name drivers that were involved in the wreck then when their days unfortunately came to a close. Anthony Alfredo was frustrated with Riley Herbst on the radio, basically saying that you got to use the brake and you got to basically turn in the corner. You can't send me off. Riley Herbst also spoke to the media after the race as well, including Matt Weaver, and basically said that Anthony is going to need that kind of favor when he goes into the playoffs at one point, and he's not going to receive that favor. I have seen a lot of people blaming Anthony Alfredo for the incident. I think Anthony does share a little bit of fault, but I also put most of the blame on Riley Herbst. Riley Herbst completely sent it in the corner, really not going to make the corner, and just completely sent it in to Anthony Alfredo. Anthony has to make that corner. If he doesn't make that corner, he's going to have to perform a stop-and-go penalty, even though NASCAR has been inconsistent when it comes to those stop-and-go penalties like they were during the Cup Series race earlier today. So I don't blame Anthony for showing a little bit of frustration to Riley Herbst. I think Riley Herbst is a good driver. I think he does have talent and has shown a lot of improvement this year. But some of the driving antics that I've seen from Riley Herbst this year at times, and just some of the dumb, careless mistakes that Riley Herbst has performed on the racetrack, has just been unacceptable. And by the way, he's being considered for NASCAR Cup Series ride with 2311 over a driver like Corey Heim. That kind of stuff and racing like an idiot on the racetrack is not going to gain you respect. And I don't think it's going to make people happy and not going to want to work with you. And their drivers in the sport are not going to have respect for you because you do stuff like this. Riley's had a reputation with a lot of people, and there's been a lot of people that have been frustrated with the way Riley Herbst races on the racetrack. And I think he needs to clean that up if he's going to gain respect. You can't race like that and expect people to race you back clean. That's not going to happen. I feel like he needs to clean that up going forward because especially if him going to Cup Series, people in the Cup Series, including his teammates, are not going to tolerate that stuff. Most likely Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick could be teammates. He's got to clean that up if he wants to gain respect from the drivers. To be honest, he needs to clean it up and stop racing like an idiot, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Erik Jones and Kaz Grala. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at the Charlotte ROVAL earlier today, you saw the incidents that took place on the racetrack between Erik Jones and Kaz Grala. Now, both drivers have been struggling all day. They were basically both outside of the top 30. You had some really good battling going up front, and these two were just going at it. And Erik Jones was, like I said, was not having a good day, and Grala was kind of struggling early in the race. They basically was contact going down the back straightaway where there was contact in the bus stop, and I think there was some contact between both where Erik Jones, I think, got shoved off the racetrack. Erik then tried to pay him back multiple times. They were beating and banging all over the place. And then basically in the final corner, Kaz Grala got ran off the racetrack by Erik Jones, and he had to perform a stop-and-go penalty. After, like I said, there was retaliation between both of the drivers. And then there was a video where basically he got interviewed, I think, by people from Front Stretch, where he basically said that at some point this 15 car is not going to get wrecked because we're not going to tolerate it. And then after the race concluded again, Kaz Grala sent out a tweet showing that there were 3 times where it was the 43 team's fault. Now, Eric Jones has not responded at this time when it comes to the incident, but usually Eric Jones on Twitter very late at night. So I have to think and imagine that Eric Jones more than likely is going to send a mean tweet or something like that over to Kaz Grala, and probably there's going to be a response back and forth going between both of those guys. Look, like I said, both drivers were in the back of the field and they were struggling all day. They don't need to be doing that stuff on the racetrack, especially if they both took each other out and one had gotten to the outside wall. That could have resulted in a caution. And we could have seen the race completely shaken up because those two wanted to race like clowns on the back of the field. Like I said, Kaz Grala was not having a good day for his standards on a road course. He usually runs a lot better than he ran. And then, of course, Eric Jones, who has struggled on road courses in recent years. I think that if you want to gain respect on the racetrack, you can't be doing that kind of stuff where you're racing each other like idiots on the track. And there was a lot of lack of driving standards throughout the day. Not just these two. You had Carson Osbar sending it really far wide and took out Shane Van Gisbergen at one point. SVG was sending it hard. Tyler Reddick almost got taken out of the playoffs because of his stupidity. It just was a complete mess and clown show at times today, and it was just very frustrating to watch as a fan. But I think for these two, they need to make it up. But I don't think this beef between these two are just over yet. I think at some point both these drivers will get back into it once again. And I think you'll see some frustration from both drivers going in the future. I think it's going to continue to happen. You'll see some frustration from both drivers in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the IndyCar Fox booth. Now, earlier tonight during the Fox NFL game that was going on between the Dallas Cowboys, you probably saw a little bit of promotion for the Grand Prix of Arlington that will take place in 2026. And you also saw some promotion for the 109th Indianapolis 500 that will take place in 2025, which will be on Fox Sports. Now, Jenna Fryer was asked a question in regards to who is going to be in the IndyCar Fox booth for 2025. Well, she has reported, while not confirmed, she has reported that it sounds like we know who the booth is going to be for 2025. According to her, it sounds like Townsend Bell, James Hinchcliffe, and Alan Bestwick are going to be the IndyCar Fox booth in 2025. First of all, Townsend Bell getting in the IndyCar booth for Fox, no-brainer. He's done an excellent job with NBC for the many years he's been with it, since like 2013 or 2014. That's a no-brainer. He's done an excellent job. Great pickup there. James Hinchcliffe, been great the last couple years. Been a great replacement for Paul Tracy, who left a few years ago. He's done an amazing and fantastic job. No-brainer to bring him back. But Alan Bestwick joining the IndyCar booth for Fox. This is going to be maybe the biggest dub that Fox has had in a very long time. Obviously, I've been critical of Fox's NASCAR coverage in recent years, but bringing Alan Bestwick into the Fox family, that is massive. Alan Bestwick, in my opinion, is one of the greatest broadcasters we have seen over the course of the last 30 years. He's called some amazing broadcasts over the years. He's called some very amazing IndyCar races, many past Indy 500s, and I think he's done an excellent job over the years as an IndyCar or even a NASCAR broadcaster. And this could also potentially lead to him maybe being the eventual replacement for Mike Joy, maybe in the NASCAR side of things. Obviously, Mike Joy is getting a lot older at this point. I think if he becomes a lead commentator for NASCAR coverage, let's say 2026 perhaps, if Mike Joy retires, that could lead to that. I've been wanting Alan Bestwick back in the booth for so long, and the fact it sounds like he's going to be back commentating racing next year, that is huge. I wish he was going to Amazon or TNT, but the fact he's going to be in a booth next year, to be honest, is really amazing, really fantastic, and really incredible. So I'm really happy to hear this news and glad to see that we kind of know who will be in the booth most likely in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen once again. As Shane Van Gisbergen confirmed earlier tonight that he will be driving a 16 car for Kaulig Racing this weekend in the NASCAR Cup Series at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. This will be, I believe, his 5th or 6th scheduled race, or the 2nd race in a row that he has ran. He's ran a lot of races in the playoffs so far this year. Ran Darlington, ran, of course, Talladega not too long ago. So he's had technically 3 consecutive NASCAR Cup Series races run in a a row. And he's done a really good job in his select NASCAR Cup Series starts. Obviously, with the Charlotte ROVAL, while he did not go to victory lane, he finished in 7th place. Now, unfortunately, we're probably going to be getting back to reality where I don't expect SVG to be a major threat and contender for the win because he has not been as good on the ovals as he's been on the road courses, even though I will say he has shown so much improvement on the ovals throughout this year, at least on the NASCAR Xfinity Series side. If you want my realistic expectations for SVG this weekend, I think he most likely finishes around the 20th place to 25th place. I think he's going to qualify really far back because college racing equipment on the Cup side outside of the road courses has just not been that great. I'm going to be real and honest. But I do think if Trackhouse is preparing this entry, he'll probably improve throughout the event. Ultimately, I think finishing on the lead lap would be incredible because I do think we're going to get a lot of green flag runs throughout the event because I think it's going to be very much a track position day at points. But I think if he can get a really solid run, that's all that matters, and completing the laps is all that matters at this point. It's a great opportunity for Shane, and to be honest, I think he's going to do overall a pretty awesome, a pretty amazing, and great job, and glad to see he'll get the chance and opportunity to drive for Kaulig once again at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Really glad to see he's back in that car, to be honest. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carl Edwards. Now, Carl Edwards was once again at another NASCAR Cup Series race as he was spotted at the Charlotte ROVAL. Carl Edwards, of course, was going to be given the command for the NASCAR Cup Series race in the Charlotte ROVAL along with Ricky Rudd, as both of those drivers, of course, will be inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame in January of next year as they will join the class of 2025. Carl Edwards, though, has been around the sport a lot more frequently. A couple weekends ago, he was spotted at Kansas Speedway. Denny Hamlin also talked about the fact not too long ago on Actions Detrimental that he says that 2311 Racing does have a car ready for him if Carl ever gets that itch and wants to come back to racing once again. And Carl did say he might come back in the future if, of course, they can increase the horsepower, which with NASCAR, I'm not really sure if they're ever going to increase the horsepower. So at this particular moment in point, I'm not exactly sure if that will ever happen. But obviously, Denny Hamlin has said they do have a car ready. They actually had asked Carl back in 2020 if they wanted to give him a try. Now, Carl has been in the simulator for Toyota. He helped a lot with, of course, Trackhouse with their program. Has also helped a lot with Toyota's road course program, as, of course, he has been in the simulator. I think Carl getting back behind the wheel would honestly be really awesome and really great for the sport. Carl is a massive and a major brand ambassador for NASCAR. And to see him also coming back to the racetrack, that is huge. Let's say Carl doesn't come back, though, as a driver. What about an analyst? We don't know who's going to be part of the broadcast crews at least for 2025 on the TNT side at this point. We also don't know who will be in the broadcast booth for some of the other networks at this point. Why not basically go ahead and bring Carl in? To be honest, I think that would be really good to see. Carl being in the broadcast booth would be great. And I know Carl has stated recently that he at least has had some interest in maybe coming into a booth and doing some broadcasting. And I think him coming back along, maybe Kurt Busch, perhaps someone like that, would be pretty awesome to see. So I really hope it does happen. He comes back into sport in some sort of capacity. I get if he doesn't want to come back and drive. That's definitely fine and understandable. But coming back to work in the sport in some sort of capacity, to be honest, would be really amazing, really awesome, and great. So I hope it does happen. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't know at this point. I know 2311 does have a car ready for him. And of course, they're hiring employees for a third car at this point. I really hope he does get the chance and opportunity in the not so distant future to race in one of the cars that 2311 does have. If not, it is what it is at this point. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, over the weekend, there was a lot of drivers that were complaining about the turtles at the Charlotte ROVAL. Mark Truex Jr. had actually stated to the media that basically when he went over the ROVALs, it felt like he was getting a concussion, and they were feeling almost 15 to 16 Gs when they were going, of course, over the turtle, when they were going up 4.5 feet, and they were feeling Gs every single time. What they're saying is that it felt like you were getting into the outside wall. Kyle Busch also actually commented on this as well, and he actually agreed with Martin Truex Jr. He says that it felt like you were getting a concussion and it was hurting his head. And he said he was also not very happy with the ROVAL changes. He didn't really understand why they changed turn number 7, and also wasn't sure why they changed the back stretch or on the front stretch where they kind of changed there. Now, NASCAR did correct the situation where obviously they lowered the turtles throughout the event. Instead of having it basically 4 feet up, it was only 2 feet up. Now, obviously, it was a lot better for the drivers because it's not going to feel like you're going to be getting a concussion because this next-gen car obviously has major problems there, and it's really only issue in the NASCAR Cup Series because the car is so low to the ground and the car can hit the turtles. They're getting airborne very, very quickly. I understand Kyle Busch's frustration 100%. Look, I get it. Kyle Busch is a driver who wants to race for a very, very long time, and having something like this where you can get seriously injured, especially for a driver who's almost 40 years old, by the way, it's really, really understandable. We have seen drivers that have had concussions in the next-gen era. Drivers like Alex Bowman, who sat out for a little bit, who we talk about near the end of this episode. Drivers, of course, like Kurt Busch, whose career pretty much came to an end because of what ended up happening. I think that if they can figure something out with this next-gen car to solve this problem, that would be a really great thing. But until then, because obviously there was penalties for going across that area, and I feel like that the ROVAL law did produce some solid racing, I get the drivers being absolutely frustrated with the changes. Because I do think that this track does present some major challenges, and I think it does, it's understandable, like I said, why the drivers were very frustrated, and also kind of pissed at the same time, too, that it was like it the way it was. So I 100% get the frustration, it's understandable, and I'm glad to see they did make changes to try to make the product a little bit better. I thought that, like I said, the racing today was honestly better than other ROVAL races. Granted, I've seen some better races for sure at Charlotte ROVAL, but honestly, for a Charlotte ROVAL race and the next-gen era, it honestly was not that bad. I think they made better changes overnight. I think it helped a little bit because drivers weren't really hurting after the race, and there was definitely some positive effect from some of the drivers, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brad Keselowski. Now, Brad Keselowski was speaking to the media yesterday after NASCAR Cup Series qualifying had officially concluded from the Charlotte ROVAL. And Brad Keselowski was asked questions surrounding his roof rails. And basically, he kind of commented on the situation. What he said is that the metal broke on the roof rails on the car, and he said that is why it broke, not just on the number 6 car, but also on the number 17 car as well. If you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race, you probably saw that most cars had all the roof rails that were extended for safety reasons, so if a flip ended up happening, the car would not end up going over very easily, and we got very lucky to not have a flip in any of NASCAR's top 3 series, which is a big surprise considering at most next-gen super speed races in recent years, we have seen a lot of flips. But if you looked at the photo that surfaced, there were roof rails gone. Now, obviously, NASCAR did not disqualify him, but Denny Hamlin actually commented, and this is where a lot of the media attention really came from, is the fact that basically the roof rails had kind of were off the car, and every other car had that. We have seen other drivers get penalties for certain things like this where they have gotten disqualifications. And the big thing is no one got taken back to the R&D center. And a lot of people are kind of wondering why the 6 and the 17 car did not receive a penalty. Kevin Harvick actually got a disqualification after Talladega because I think they had some sort of penalty on the car. Something like a windshield thing was kind of loose, or a bolt or something like that was loose on the car. And basically they went, I think, to try to appeal that penalty, but obviously that did not end up going through. But if the metal broke on the car and that's a defect, if it was something that RFK manufactured, then yes, they probably should have got a penalty. But if it's something that they didn't really do anything wrong with, I can't really blame them in that situation. But at the same time, that's something that really needs to be worked on. There's no reason that there are the only ones that had this problem come into play. Now, if we see this issue come up for other teams like Hendrick Motorsports, for example, for Gibbs in the final races, even though we're not going to have a super speedway, then yeah, I completely understand. But these roof rails have been for the super speedway races. And again, they are meant for safety. So that could definitely be a safety hazard for sure. Imagine if a driver like Kyle Larson has something like that happen, or Chase Elliott, who's in the playoffs at this point. Imagine it happens to those two guys. Or Joey Logano, who's back in the playoffs after a disqualification, or Tyler Reddick. That could have a lot of major implications. So if the metal broke on the car, fine, that is completely understandable, but it definitely is very interesting that it only happened on the RFK cars and it really didn't happen on the other cars. It's kind of fishy if you ask me just a little bit, but I understand why they're going to defend it, right? It's understandable and kind of understandable why they went ahead and didn't get a penalty to them. I was a little surprised that there wasn't some sort of checking in that area, but I do understand why they didn't give it a penalty. It was probably some sort of defect that happened on the RFK cars, but it might have been something that was intentional. We really don't know if it was completely intentional, though, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Parker Kligerman. Now, we're going to have a couple Parker Kligerman stories to talk about in the video, including the officiating controversy that we'll get to here in just a short little bit. But Parker Kligerman was asked questions surrounding about potentially unretiring and coming back full-time in 2025. Parker had an extremely impressive run at the Charlotte ROVAL, and some people feel like, including myself, that he could still do it if he basically decided to unretire and come back to full-time racing. It does need to be noted, though, that Parker Kligerman is not retiring from full-time racing. Well, he's not retiring from racing altogether. He's just retiring from full-time racing. Well, Parker did confirm to the media yesterday after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race that he is not changing his mind about retiring from full-time racing. He does note that he is 34 years old, and there's a lot of other things that he wants to do before he gets a lot older. And I completely respect that. And look at Parker Kligerman's career. Parker has had a very solid career in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, especially with big machine racing. He's been one of the most consistent drivers in the NASCAR Xfinity Series throughout this year. I think he's had like 14 or 15 top 10s, and he's only got a few finishes outside of the top 15 throughout the whole entire year. And obviously, the officiating controversy frustrated a lot of people, but the reason I think a lot of people are frustrated is because Parker Kligerman is an extremely popular driver. A lot of people really like Parker Kligerman. And when he confirmed that he would be retiring from full-time racing after this season, a lot of people, including myself, were absolutely shocked and stunned because a lot of people feel like that Parker could have gone into next year and could have absolutely been a championship threat and contender. I really thought this year he was going to be a championship threat because they ended the year off so well and he nearly had a chance and opportunity to make it to the round of 8. And while he hasn't been able to pick up a victory throughout the year so far, he's been better than other drivers. Sammy Smith, who made the next round, he's been better than Sammy Smith. He's been better at times than Riley Herbst throughout the year. And he's been up there contending for wins on a week-by-week basis, and to be inside the top 10 and top 15 weekly with big machine racing is very, very impressive. Obviously, going into next year, Nick Sanchez is going to be taking over that car, and I do think that Nick Sanchez is going to do solid. Nick's a pretty good driver. I think Nick is one of the best young drivers we have, one of the best young prospects we have, and I think he'll do a really good job taking over for Parker next year. Again, it is a shame to see that Parker is truly retiring from full-time racing at the end of this year because Parker, in my opinion, has done absolutely amazing and fantastic job and is still one of the best drivers we have in NASCAR today. I would have to think he's going to do some TV work next year, of course, obviously with his TV commitments with NBC. Most likely he'll be doing that for 2025. That's not been confirmed at this point. That's just what I think is most likely going to happen. But I do believe that he has done an amazing job over these last few years. Again, I understand why people want him to come back because he's done a really good job this year and has performed exceptionally well. It's a shame he can't compete for a championship next year, and it's a shame he got eliminated from the playoffs because I think he's done a really good job. But Parker's a great talent, a great driver, and a great person, and everything he's been able to accomplish in his sport has been pretty good. It's a shame he's retiring from full-time racing, but I do think he's done a really solid job over these last few years, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the damaged vehicle policy. As it was reported by Jeff Gluck on Friday afternoon and other reporters in the industry, the NASCAR had a call with crew chiefs this week and will officiate the rest of the season like Talladega, including earlier today at the Charlotte ROVAL. It's also noted that during this offseason, there are some big changes that are planned for 2025 when it comes to the damaged vehicle policy. Obviously, Chris Gabehart had went on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio and had stated that most likely there was going to be a lot more clarification when it came around. If you, of course, watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega, you saw a major controversy. The prior week, Josh Berry at Kansas had basically had just flat tires, really not a lot of damage in this car. But for whatever reason, NASCAR decided to tow him back to the garage and never towed him back to his pit box to get tires. Ronnie Childers was frustrated about that, and Josh Berry was also very frustrated about that situation as well. And many feel like, including myself, that absolutely that could have been avoided and shouldn't have gone the way it did. Then the next week at Talladega, we obviously have another controversy where there's a big one that happens where 28 cars were involved, which, by the way, is the most in a single wreck in NASCAR Cup Series history, and it took out a ton of cars, and you had 3 cars towed back to the pits. Chase Elliott, Chase Briscoe, and Harrison Burton. all were towed back to the pits, who had more damage than Josh Berry had at Kansas, and those guys were able to still continue going. And there was also major issues at DVP on other guys that were not getting up to minimum speed. And it caused a lot of havoc and controversy. And I said this a couple days ago. They either need to change the way they're doing this stuff, clarify it going into next year, or just get rid of DVP altogether. I am glad that they're going to be staying at least consistent, however, with the way they at least officiate that. But obviously, officiating has been a big problem all year, and we'll get to that here in just a short little bit with how the Xfinity Series race was officiated. But I would like to see a lot more consistency with the DVP if we're going to keep it around. But if you want my personal opinion when it comes to damaged vehicle policy, I think we should just scrap it all together and get rid of it. Personally, I do think that the way it should be done is that if your car is damaged, if you can't basically tow it back, don't let the officials decide. The team should be able to decide who goes to the garage and if you're done for the day. Let them go to the garage, work on their cars, and send them back out. That's what made NASCAR so special many years ago before they brought DVP in 2017, is you had cars that were 100 laps down that would come back out to try to get points. I feel like that's the way it should be. I don't think that the DVP should determine if you're in or out of a race. I think it needs to change, and I really hope that they get rid of it in the future. Obviously, if they can find a way to streamline it and make it better, fine. But don't make it so confusing. At least now it's not as confusing, and the way they've done it at least is a little bit better. But I feel like that's how the way it should have done all year, and they haven't done a fantastic job, and they need to clear it up. There's been a lot of unclarifying from the officiating crew this year in NASCAR, and it really needs to change going forward because the way things have been done this year when it comes to officiating is just unacceptable. It needs to get better, and I'm glad to see that they're at least going to be consistent. There's no reason that a guy like Chase Elliott or Kyle Larson should get preferable treatment, or other drivers like Bubba Wallace, or if any of these guys are in the playoffs, they should be able to, or Kyle Busch, for example, and if he's in the playoffs next year, they should get preferable treatment over guys that are non-playoff drivers. To me, you can't have that kind of stuff happening. It needs to be consistent, and I hope the consistency that they're bringing this time around is the way they're going to be doing it going forward, in my honest opinion. I really hope this is the way they do it going forward. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Elliott. Now, a lot of drivers over the weekend were asked about the new policy coming from the damaged vehicle policy. And obviously, Bubba Wallace was really frustrated about it, saying that it's going to get changed once again. Denny Hamlin had his thoughts about it. Kyle Busch had his thoughts about the new ruling on the damaged vehicle policy. And many other drivers in the industry had frustrations about it as well. But the most outspoken driver, and it's definitely a shock to see this guy very outspoken about things, but the most outspoken driver when it came to this stuff was Chase Elliott. And he basically wasn't just calling out the damaged vehicle policy, he also was calling out the next-gen car. He basically said that you need to look at the other areas of the car and says that this car has a major design flaw. And he says that the next-gen car desperately needs to be changed if you don't want these issues to arise. I completely agree with Chase Elliott. There is definitely a major design flaw with this next-gen car. The biggest problem that this next-gen car has, and why we've been seeing so many of these damaged vehicle policy problems, is this car, the tires on the car do not have interliners. Every prior car in NASCAR, especially I think in the last 40, 50 years, there's been an interliner installed. If you had a flat tire, you can come back down to pit road. But if you have a flat tire in the next-gen car, you're basically going to end up being beach. And what happens there is that your car ends up getting stuck. You turn into a beach wheel, and you cannot move. And then you have all this frustration from drivers like Joey Logano, who got into it with the officials at Talladega. And I think it's caused a lot more problems than it's caused a lot of solutions. And I think this next-gen car, there are a lot of major problems that this next-gen car really, really has. And it absolutely needs to be fixed in those certain areas because I feel like the issues with this next-gen car have caused so many problems. And when it comes to DVP, I think you need to get rid of DVP for that area. I'm glad they made changes to that, like I said a few minutes ago, but I think Chase Elliott is absolutely right. And I think Bubba's also right. I think you're going to see a lot of controversy going forward with this next-gen car, at least with the DVP. And I think it's only going to get better if NASCAR can resolve the issues with the next-gen car itself. Because like I said, the next-gen car has a major, major fundamental flaw and major, major problems that desperately need to be worked on. And I'm not sure if NASCAR is going to step up and fix it. In my opinion, an interliner in this next-gen car would solve a lot of these flat tire problems. I think that would be one way to do it. I don't know if you have to shorten the tire for that to happen or shorten the wheelbase, for example, but I feel like having an inner liner wouldn't cause all these flat tire issues. Yes, you might have flat tires from time to time, but you most likely can drive it back. Yes, you might have an opportunity of debris coming in the car, but guess what? You have an inner liner, you can drive back to pit road, and teams can work on the car. Yes, he might be on DVP at that point, but you don't have the beach stuff going on. They also do another change I didn't mention is that they are going to not start the clock until you get to pit road. I think that's a fair change. But like I said, Chase Elliott is absolutely right. The next-gen car's got major problems in a lot of areas. They've got issues on the short tracks, issues on the road courses, issues in a lot of different areas, and there needs to be resolving going on. I really hope NASCAR is looking to resolve a lot of these major issues and a lot of fundamental flaws with the next-gen car, because if they can do that, I think the sport will be in a much better place. I really hope NASCAR is looking at resolving some of these issues and problems with the next-gen car, because no reason that we should be having drivers calling this out. There's a lot of things this car needs to be worked on, and there's a lot of massive and a lot of major fundamental flaws that the next-gen car has currently at this moment. Hope they can fix and resolve these issues going forward, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the officiating controversy from the Xfinity race at the Charlotte ROVAL. So, if you watch the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at the Charlotte ROVAL, you have probably not seen what had happened. So, coming to 2 laps ago in this race, Parker Kligerman is trying to hold off a hard-charging Sam Mayer for the win. You also have AJ Allmendinger and Shane Van Gisbergen, who are right behind Parker Kligerman, trying to find their way to victory. Sam Mayer had been battling really hard with Parker for the race lead, and they were putting on a really awesome and great show. All of a sudden, as they were up on the backstretch, Lee Honeyman has a flat left front tire, I believe, and runs into the tire barrier and is clearly stuck inside the tire barrier. Well, it takes them 15 seconds. They don't throw the caution. They wait 20 seconds. They don't throw the yellow flag. They don't do it after 30 seconds. They wait until Parker Kligerman is on the line, not hit the start-finish line, but about half a second before Parker Kligerman is going to hit the finish line. Because of that, and because of it, the caution comes out. They would re-rack the field, go back and restart. Parker would end up losing the race because Sam Mayer made an aggressive but very fair and clean move and passed Parker Kligerman for the win. Parker had a tire rub and went from winning the race, finishing all the way back to 6th position. After the race, Parker Kligerman was absolutely devastated and was really frustrated. Eric Almirola and Shane Van Gisbergen went to consolidate him, and he had a lot of drivers in the industry, many legends of the sport, I believe, were coming up to talk to Parker Kligerman after the race, and were on social media. That's what Parker said. A lot of people were messaging him after the race. And then you have NASCAR's explanation to what happened. NASCAR said that they could not see the car stuck in there, and they basically couldn't see it from the tower. Very similar to their stupid explanation they had with Eric Almirola winning the race at New Hampshire because of tinted windows. When I heard this explanation, I was like, are you kidding me? There is clearly a car that is stuck in the tire barriers. How do you not see that? How did the TV cameras pop it up? Fans could see it. Everyone could see it. People in the infield could see there's a car clearly stuck in the tire barrier. How in the world, as an officiating crew, can you screw up this badly? I do believe, and I will say this, that the caution was the right call. It was a justified call. The problem is they waited 35 seconds. There was no way Leland Honeyman was going to be getting out. And people getting mad at Leland Honeyman, I really don't understand that, by the way. Leland should be not getting caught any flack in this situation. He had a flat tire, from crying out loud. He should be not getting called that at all by any fans. He can't control that. I don't understand how NASCAR waited 40 seconds to throw the caution. It's unacceptable. And this is not the first time that NASCAR has had a really bad officiating controversy. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, we had the situation with the whole DVP problem. That thing is an officiating issue because officials can't get it together. And they've had the other issues throughout the year. I go back to 2 years ago with Ryan Blaney in the window net situation because NASCAR threw the caution 1 second before he came across the line. I feel horrible for Parker Kligerman. He had this race in the bag, was going to win very easily, and yet NASCAR screwed up once again. And it's not the first time that NASCAR screwed up this year. It's not the second time. It's not the 5th time. This is like, the 10th or 15th time just this year alone, go back to the Brickyard 400, where basically you had Kyle Larson leading, and you have Ryan Preece, who's got flat tires, out of gas, by the way, after getting turned by Chase Elliott, and they didn't throw the caution till he got there 25 seconds later. I know there is a delay when it comes to the caution button, but if you want to be a sanctioning body, you've got to take this seriously. And especially during the playoffs, you should be on your A game. There is no reason this late into the season we should be having officiating problems. There has been so many officiating problems in 2024, and since David Hoots left, there needs to be some accountability, and there's been none. And there needs to be major changes and major accountability going forward, because you cannot have stuff like this happening. You cannot have drivers doing this stuff. You can't have NASCAR officials doing this kind of stuff and not doing the right thing. They need to get it together. I feel horrible for Parker. He got robbed, in my opinion, and it's just frustrating because NASCAR screwed up so many times, and there absolutely needs to be major changes coming to the officiating. I really hope those changes are coming really, really soon. It needs to happen very quickly going into the offseason, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. Now, I kind of touched about this on the channel a couple days ago when we were talking about some Spire Motorsports rumors, but Breakheart brought this up on his channel as well. But it was reported by NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia, I believe last Wednesday, that Spire Motorsports may potentially be running a fourth part-time entry in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025. Like I said, they're not expected to expand to a four full-time cars in 2025. What it sounds like, and Breakheart brought this up as well, is it sounds like this could potentially be a development car for Hendrick Motorsports for some of their drivers. Basically, we all know going into next year, the Spire Motorsports is expected to get a lot more technical support, not only from Chevrolet, but also from Hendrick Motorsports. They are expected to upgrade this organization very similar to what Stewart-Haas Racing had. And you've obviously got some drivers who are under the Hendrick development pipeline who could get this chance and opportunity. Like perhaps maybe Anthony Alfredo, for example. Anthony Alfredo is obviously a driver who does simulator work for Hendrick Motorsports. He's helped a lot this year. I could see him getting a chance and opportunity behind the wheel of this car at some point. I could also see another driver like Kyle Weatherman, who's done simulator work for Hendrick Motorsports in recent years, getting a chance and opportunity. But most likely, Roger Kurf would end up being the driver. Now, Roger Kurf, do I think he's ready for a full-time ride in the NASCAR Cup Series? Absolutely not. Roger is nowhere close to being ready for a full-time opportunity. But a few races perhaps behind the wheel of this seat, I could definitely see that being a possibility to get some Cup Series experience, especially since Roger won't be available for a Cup ride anytime soon. Yes, we keep hearing about Alex Bowman losing his ride. It keeps coming up like every week, it seems like, even though Hendrick clearly confirmed that they're not doing that at this point. I think that getting these drivers an opportunity would be majorly huge. And maybe getting some drivers from the Xfinity Series, like a Nick Sanchez, for example. Maybe trying out other drivers a chance and opportunity that I think deserve it, like a Brendan Butterbean Queen, for example, who's been rumored to go to Spire Motorsports. Maybe try someone from Xfinity that has some experience, like a Connor Zilisch, for example. Connor Zilisch is under contract with Trackhouse, and we know that Trackhouse gets a lot of work from Hendrick Motorsports, especially since JRM has a big alliance with Hendrick. I'd have to think Connor Zilisch more than likely could get some Cup starts. We all thought maybe he'd get a start before the end of the year of how good he's been on road courses. Why not put him behind a wheel? Or do like a Project 91 entry, for example, where you get drivers in different forms of racing a chance opportunity at this. That would be super exciting and fantastic if that was to be the case. A catch-up on silly season, speaking of Spire Motorsports, they are expected to announce some plans maybe in the future. Basically, we do know Roger Kurf most likely back with Spire Motorsports in the Craftsman Truck Series next year. I did see NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia bring up the fact that Brendan Butterbean Queen is rumored. Kaz Grall's name's been mentioned as a potential possibility to go to their truck program. And Andres Prezzolora, I do expect will be part of this team in 2025. There are some other teams that haven't finalized anything in the lower series. JGR still has a couple rides still not announced at this moment. Sheldon Creed, of course, going to Haas Factory team. We all thought Haley Dean was going there, but Sheldon Creed and Sam Mayer going over to Haas Factory. We don't think Chandler Smith will be back with Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025. We think he'll most likely be leaving. It's unknown where he's officially going at this time. Maybe Sam on Racing, perhaps. But there's some other teams that haven't announced anything. I don't know if Spire, they could run a part-time Xfinity program. That is a potential possibility. Obviously, some of the drivers like Rick Ware, we do know Rick Ware is expected to lease out a charter. RFK Racing, Ryan Preece is expected to be the driver of that car, though it's not been announced at this point. They are going to have 2 cars for the Daytona 500. I could see Harrison Burton, Sheldon Creed, or Sam Mayer getting this seat for the Daytona 500, or someone else perhaps. LaJoie is expected to return to Rick Ware Racing for 2025, and then Shane Smith will likely go to the 3rd front row car, though we do need to hear by Wednesday if NASCAR is going to respond, which they do need to respond by Wednesday, which we'll get an announcement on that in the next couple of days. And we also do have some other stuff coming out in the future, like 2311 expanding, with Riley Herbst being one of the drivers. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of the silly season plays out, but I think it's really cool that it sounds like Spire is going to have a 3rd car, most likely a 4th Cup car perhaps next year. They continue to make major, massive moves, and having a 4th part-time entry for drivers to get a chance and opportunity. I think that's a really awesome and really great and pretty cool story overall, and I think it leads to some really awesome and fun stuff for this organization going into 2025. I think it's really interesting, going to be very intriguing to see how it plays out. To be perfectly honest with you, really intriguing and really interesting stuff. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Alex Bowman. Now, I did a video on this channel on the breaking news on my instant reaction, but it was officially announced last night, a couple hours after the NASCAR Cup Series race had concluded, that Alex Bowman has been disqualified at the Charlotte ROVAL. After crossing the line, finishing in 16th position, Alex Bowman had failed post-race tech, basically one of the biggest in moments in NASCAR history when it comes to post-race inspection. Alex Bowman, of course, had crossed the line in 16th position, but this disqualification drops him from being 9 points above to being 20 points below. This means that Joey Logano will go back into the playoffs at this moment. This is maybe the biggest disqualification we have seen since probably Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch getting disqualified at Pocono for the tape fiasco that took place in handing the win to Chase Elliott. That would basically screw Denny Hamlin out of making the championship 4 in 2022. We were all talking about how excited we were that Hendrick Motorsports had all 4 of their cars into the final round. Now that is not the case. Now what happened? Well, unfortunately, Alex Bowman had failed post-race inspection for failing in the minimum rear heights. And basically because certain ballast in the car, which is weight inside the car, basically that had happened. Now what's really interesting is Alex Bowman had passed in pre-race inspection, but didn't pass in post-race inspection. So what ended up happening? Well, there has been video that has been going around, and I know Basso does a lot of really good onboard camera footage, showed basically there was weight coming out of the car. Early in the race, around lap number 2 or lap number 3, I believe, basically Alex Bowman went soaring and flying, went like Travis Pastrana up on the final curb and corner. And he basically hit the outside wall and got a ton of damage. If you take a look at this video really, really closely, you can see there are certain pieces falling out of the car. That looked to me like some of the ballast that came out. And I'd have to think that that might be the big reason why the ballast came out of the car. NASCAR did explain they were, I think it was 0.17 underweight of the car, so he had lost about 17 pounds of weight and was just barely underweight of what they needed. Now, Hendrick Motorsports did come out with a statement earlier tonight after I'd filmed the original video, and Hendrick Motorsports has not made an official decision at this time if they are going to appeal the penalty or not. We'll get to back here in just a second. This is massive major. One, Joe Logano at the moment getting back in the playoffs. Joe Logano had not been in the playoffs because he just didn't have the greatest day in the world. Well, he had a really solid run, but ended up crossing the line in 8th, just didn't have the speed to get in there. Now Joe Logano has a chance and opportunity to go into the next round, and he has a really good chance because he's good at Martinsville, and he has been okay at the mile and a half, so he's not been great. He's 11 points below, but the top 4 in the standings, they don't change. Kyle Larson, of course, is cleared in inspection. He's 33 points above the cutoff line. I believe that Tyler Reddick is up by 13 or something. Actually, no, he's up by 10. Chris Ravel's up by 13, and I believe William Byron is up by 5 or 6. Chase Elliott's below, Ryan Blaney's below, and Denny Hamlin are all below the cutoff line because they don't have as many playoff wins as the top 4. So that's big for Joey Logano. As for Alex Bowman fans, I feel horrible for them. Alex Bowman has had one of those years. He's been extremely consistent so far in 2024. And he has been dealing with a lot of pressure. Obviously, there's been all these rumors going around about whether Alex Bowman is going to keep his seat with this team or not, which got cleared up literally a few weeks ago. And yet people still keep bringing up the possibility of him getting replaced. Bowman has done an excellent job this year, and he's been in the top 10 in points most of the year in the regular standings and has been super consistent. More consistent than Chase Elliott, it seems like, in recent weeks. And he had done an excellent job throughout these playoffs. Coming into this race, Alex Bowman has scored the most points of anybody in these playoffs. And it's a shame that something that really is not completely in his control really took him out of contention. Now, the big question I think a lot of you are going to be asking me, do they have a chance to appeal this penalty? Yes, they're going to appeal it. I expect that Hendrick is going to appeal it. This is very important. This basically determines if he makes the next round or not. There's also a lot of money on the line. The higher you finish in the standings, the more money your team ends up gaining for the next year. And getting into the round of 8, you're going to gain more money than finishing 9th in the standings. So I expect Hendrick that they are going to appeal. And if they show NASCAR the video in basically the appealing process, I then think they have a little bit of a case here. Like I said, looking at the evidence that is shown on the video that was surfacing, that would be their big reason. I also do believe that this ballast that came out of Alex Bowman's car, I do think it contributed to another driver's day coming to an end. Ty Gibbs, about halfway through the race, had transmission issues. I would not be shocked or surprised if that same ballast that came out of Alex Bowman's car went into the transmission for Ty Gibbs and screwed Ty Gibbs because he had transmission issues later in the race. We know JHR's engine program hasn't been great, but they've been better in recent weeks, so I have to think that played a major role. I do think Hendrick Motorsports is going to have a case if they appeal. At the time I'm filming this, they haven't announced if they're going to appeal, but I have to imagine sometime late this morning or early this afternoon, they're going to announce an appeal. That appeal will most likely happen on Wednesday. Junior Motorsports, of course, last week they appealed the Sam Mayer disqualification after the bumper on the car had not gone in, and basically they lost their appeal on when they went to Wednesday. I expect sometime today that they are going to announce an appeal. Again, I feel bad for Alex Bowman fans, though. They've had a rough year this year. There's no denying that. And to unfortunately lose the race and basically lose your playoff run because something that's not completely in your control, really disappointing and really, really frustrating. But they've had a great year this year. We could have had all 400 cars getting in the final round. Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, and William Byron, who've all been great, and Alex Bowman could have been in there. He was in, and then he wasn't in. So now you're going to have 2 Fords at this moment. You're going to have 2 Toyotas and 3 Chevys, I believe. And I think you'll have 2 or 3 Toyotas. You're going to have 2 Fords and 3 Chevrolets in the final round. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the round of 8 plays out. Again, I feel terrible for Alex Bowman in this situation. It's kind of sad to see him disqualified after them putting in the effort to do what they needed to do. And now they'll go ahead and try and appeal it. It's going to be tough for them to win, but I do think, like I said, they have a case here, and I do think they have a solid chance and opportunity to maybe go and win the appeal. So we'll see what happens if they can win the appeal. But if they do announce it sometime tomorrow, we'll break it down here on the channel and see if they can go ahead and win the appeal. We'll see how it ends up going down, in my honest opinion. So, that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think Hendrick Motorsports is going to appeal, and do you think they'll win the appeal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories talked about today on the channel, including Spire Motorsports potentially running a 4th part-time entry next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There shouldn't be more videos most likely dropping on the channel today. Tomorrow, though, we'll have basically the entries for the race at Las Vegas for the South Point 400. We also should have some other content dropping this week. We'll have a news video probably on Wednesday, and a decision on the penalty or the appeal most likely will come out if Hendrick does appeal it. And then, of course, they will most likely have the Xfinity race picks for Las Vegas as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.